Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted?
With a 2-year, $70 billion budget and new legislation before him, how much will Governor McDonnell use his red veto pen? Tonight, a political roundtable. This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Cathy Lewis. The 2010 regular session of the Virginia General Assembly adjourned earlier this month, and tonight we'll take stock of the lawmaking and the budget cutting. It's nice to have Daily Press reporter and Shad Plank columnist Kimball Payne in the studio with us tonight, instead of roaming the halls of the General Assembly as he has done ably well. Roaming the halls of the Virginian-Pilot is editorial page editor Don Luzzatto. Pilot editorial writer Christina Nuckols has taken us behind the scenes throughout this session, and Christopher Newport University political science professor Dr. Quentin Kidd joins us to weigh in on the session as well. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being back with us tonight. What a session. I mean, we started this thing out, Kimball, with the idea that there was going to be a tremendous amount of budget cutting, $4 to $4.2 billion, depending on how you count it. And at the end of the day, we heard from folks in education, social services, the arts, who were saying it was bad, but perhaps not as bad as they thought it might be.
Well, and I think everybody had been crying about it and worried about it for so long that I think that there was a huge buildup. I mean, and you got to give credit to the House and the Senate, because I mean they also pushed off some of the pain. Now some of that's going to come back around. I mean, you look at $620 million from the retirement program that they managed to push down the line. So they did some things to delay that pain. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it was funny. I think you're going to see that second round as the city councils, as the school boards start crafting their budgets, figuring out the exact ramifications of what happens. You're going to hear a second round of, okay, well, now we have to cut this. Now this has to go, or this has to go. So we're going to still hear that.
And Don, that's being debated in cities across the
budget season's just starting, and you're starting to see, you know, the level of the pain. Virginia Beach, we had a story this week about Virginia Beach considering a tax increase. I think that's probably dead in the water. Chesapeake is looking at, you know, significant personnel cuts. And I think this is one of the criticisms, if you're going to level of criticism at the conferees, is that they pushed a lot of these tough decisions down on the localities, which they don't have anywhere to go. The only place they have to go is into my pocket.
Right. Well, and that's going to be interesting, too, to see how each system plays itself out, because it'll be different in every community. And that, of course, as we know, that's where a lot of people get involved in the political process. When you start messing with their kids' schools, that's where people get engaged. So we'll see if there's some engagement around some of those issues. It seems to me, and Christina Nuckols, I'd love for you to weigh in on this, the star of the session has to be, and the star of the period afterwards has to be Ken Cuccinelli.
He was actually surprisingly somewhat quiet during the session, but it's been the Cuccinelli Palooza in Richmond ever since.
Say that 3 times fast.
No one else can even remember who else is in government right now. He's pretty much dominated the cameras. He bided his time. He's become a national darling on Fox News. And, you know, I guess in Virginia we're all holding our breath. At one point, is he going to say something so outrageous that the whole thing explodes? But for now, he's given us quite a roller coaster ride.
The Attorney General, Quentin Kidd, really carving out a name for himself in this process?
Yeah, I don't think Ken Cuccinelli got the memo that Bob McDonnell and Bill Bolling jointly signed, saying Bob McDonnell could go first, Bill Bolling would go second. I think Cuccinelli came into office and said, look, I'm going to run for governor next time. I don't care what you do, Bill Bolling, and I don't care what kind of deal you made with Bob McDonnell. And he's really carved out, I think, in my mind, he's really sort of carving out a constituency in the base of the Republican Party that's going to vote in the primary next time. And Bolling, if he has any interest in being governor, he's got to really step up. And can compete with Bolling, who has really just sucked the air out of the Republican Party. I mean, totally.
Wow. But they are pretty stark contrasts, aren't they?
Well, they are stark contrasts. I mean, I think Bolling basically has said, I'm not going to play by the rules that you guys have established. And Cuccinelli, sorry. And Cuccinelli also represents, or comes from a side of the Republican Party that is really populist in its orientation and didn't like the kind of the good old boy sort of go along to get along orientation anyway.
So we've got the health care bill at this moment who knows, has been signed, right? And then there's the Virginia Healthcare Freedom Act, which Governor McDonnell will be signing, that speaks to the idea that you can do whatever you want, federal government. We're not going to require people to buy health insurance in Virginia. And then Attorney General Cuccinelli has filed suit, along with many other, I think something like 13 other attorneys general across the country. But I think he was pretty early in the lineup.
Well, and he's filing on a very specific point, which is that you can't force Virginians to buy something. The federal government can't mandate that Virginians buy insurance. But it goes to the point that he leapt in extremely early. He wanted to get Virginia first in line to sue the federal government. I think there's some question about the validity of the lawsuit. I've read plenty of fairly derisive constitutional analyses, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. The interesting part is this doesn't take effect for 4 years.
Right.
So for the next 3 years, we'll be hearing all about this lawsuit.
Indeed, we will. And Kimball, you wrote on the Shad Plank about what Dickie Cranwell's, the Virginia Democratic Party Chair Dickie Cranwell's response to this was. He's pretty unhappy and trying to mobilize Democrats.
Oh yeah, I mean, the state Democrats have gone after Cuccinelli on this. I mean, they've started an online petition to get Cuccinelli to drop the lawsuit, set up a website where you can type in your number and immediately it connects you to the Attorney General's office. So I'm sure they're getting some phone calls.
Yeah.
I mean, they've made no bones about this, that this is a frivolous lawsuit. I mean, they wanted to know how much money was going to be spent on it. The Republican Party came back and said it was a filing fee of $350. And that's it.
But doesn't there have to also be some staff time? And
well, I'd imagine that was an early estimate of how much that they were going to spend, and probably favorable to the conservative side.
It's sad that some Democrats voted for this bill, too. I mean, some Democrats supported this bill to allow Virginia to sue.
Well, it got past the Democratic Senate.
This bill could not have become law if the Democrats had not allowed that to happen. Right. So now they scream and have press conferences and wring their hands, but the reality is that they could have put a stop to this.
It seems clear to me Democrats have decided, this is a good political opportunity for us. And I think Dickie Cranwell and the leadership of the Democratic Party see Cuccinelli as a gift to them as they roll into the fall elections. I mean, they really needed the momentum as well. They came out of a fall election where they were just beat up. They were demoralized going into the General Assembly session, and suddenly they have the gift of Cuccinelli.
And you got 2010 midterms when, college kids don't come out, first-time voters don't come out. Well, Cuccinelli pens that letter to college students. I bet you they're going to be able to mobilize UVA, William and Mary. There are going to be some voter drives on college campuses this fall.
The ruling, I guess you would say, or the opinion, I guess it was. It was an opinion.
It's not even a technical opinion. It's just a letter.
It's just a letter.
Right.
To the university saying you should not be covering in your protected class determinations gay people, right? In terms of employment.
Yeah, the letter, I'm sure that you've all seen the letter, but the letter starts out, some people have asked. In order for it to be an official...
I've written a lot of news stories like that.
Right, exactly.
Some people wonder.
The Code of Virginia specifies when the Attorney General would give some official legal advice, and it has to be officially requested by,
so some people have requested.
So some people have asked. It's not really clear who, where this came from, where the question came from, but it essentially.
His opinion was really in question, but
he is the attorney for these colleges. So when you think about it in those terms, normally when an attorney general is concerned about something that one of his clients has done, he'll couch it in terms of, you may wish to consider rewording, but he just said, you are wrong and you'd better change it, which is not the kind of thing that you would want in terms of legal advice to be out in the public realm. So it was clear this was not just aimed at them, but was meant to make a public statement.
Oh, and he had to know it was going to make a splash, because one of the things that we kind of noticed early on was in the letter, he names all these previous attorney generals, Belial's, and names it by name, date.
Who later came back and said, oh, by the way, here's why that's not right.
Right, but he names all these folks and all these previous people, and then he says, oh, and this office concluded in 2006. Well, what name did he leave out?
Yeah.
Bob McDonnell.
Right.
The only name he left out of the letters. And that has to be deliberate.
So how did this play out on college campuses? How was it playing out at Christopher Newport?
Students were very frustrated.
Yeah.
I mean, they rallied, against it and have a petition circulating to give the Board of Visitors, and I think that happened all over Virginia.
And so one supposes they may be more active in the midterms than they might otherwise have been?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. I mean, I think it depends to what extent Cuccinelli is still an issue, to what extent this is still an issue, because I can't imagine a board at any of the colleges or universities changing their policies, to be honest with you.
And so
the governor went behind the scenes, essentially, and told everybody,
exactly.
Look, I'm not going to press this issue, and I'm the only one that really could press the board, so you guys just ignore it.
Some people said he waited a little bit long to do that. Was that your
Well, no, I mean...
the governor, I mean.
I don't know what the governor seemed to have, seemed to be backed into a corner by his attorney general. This is not the way these offices ordinarily sort of interact.
Yeah, you sort of think, hello, planning on this thing, how would that work out for you?
I mean, there was frustration on campus, but there was frustration in the governor's office, too. They did not like the surprise.
In fact, when the governor, I understand when the governor issued his Directive 1,
yes,
they waited until 5 minutes before they released it to let the Attorney General's office know it was coming out.
Right.
They were just sending a message, we're irritated with you.
Yeah. We've got this. Yeah, exactly. So as you think about this, the midterms coming up, you've got Glenn Nye in the second, casting a vote against the health care bill as a Democrat, and certainly folks in the second, you hear them all over the place on this. You hear Democrats saying he's not Democratic enough, and that's a problem, and you hear Republicans saying he's too Democratic, and so we want one of the legions of folk who are running for that seat on the Republican side of the ticket.
Well, our letters are all over the map. It's been fascinating to read them. You've got Democrats saying that he's not Democratic enough. You've got Republicans saying, well, great for him, he voted, but I'm going to vote for the Republican in the fall. So I'm not sure where the constituency was for the decision he made. To his credit, he's been very consistent about his opposition to this for a variety of reasons. I think it's telling that nobody believes him right now. It's telling and it's sad.
Was there any vote he could have made?
He's trying to thread a needle here, and it's really, really interesting to watch the Republicans. I mean, there's 7 Republicans, and I got a couple of releases that said, well, sure, I would have voted exactly how he did, but that doesn't make his vote any better. And I'm like,
oh, I mean, D by his name.
Right, the intellectual gymnastics to kind of condemn him, but at the same time, you're right, these Democrats, the folks that swept him into office, looked for Barack Obama on the top of the ticket, Mark Warner at the middle of the ticket. I mean, he had some powerhouse lead-ins, and he does not have them in the 2010 midterms, so you're going to have to see him work.
So it's an interesting question, political strategist. Is there any vote he could have made on this? That I mean, it feels like he was in a real tough place any way he voted on this.
I mean, he's not going to get Republican votes at all. The best he can hope for is that Republicans beat themselves up to the point where their candidate is really weak. In my mind, he would have been better off solidifying his base. Yeah. And all of the strategists nationally said as soon as this thing is passed and done with, support for it would go up. So if I were advising him, and I'm not, and I wouldn't, but I would have said, support it. The support will be there. It's either going to be a non-issue. It's either going to be a non-issue. It'll disappear as an issue in a few months, or support for it will go up. But I don't know what his thinking was.
It'll be interesting to see whether the national Democratic organizations give him a lot of money, because they're going to have a fair number of battles on their hand in the fall. So really, they are still poll driven, and if he can't show early on in this that he does have a hold on this district, he may not get much support.
Well, we have a great test case here. Compare how Perriello does.
Yes,
Congressman Perriello with Congressman Nye. They took 2 different approaches to this.
Right. Sure did.
And I would guess Perriello is going to do much better in his reelection
because
efforts.
He voted for it.
Because he essentially stayed true to his party, and he defended himself and he defended his party, and he's going to have a base of support that's going to be stronger there than Nye.
And he's probably a pretty sympathetic character now that people have posted his brother's brother's address on the website, and that's been very troubling.
Yeah, well, I think Perriello is a really interesting case because he also handled the outcry very differently. He held more town halls than anybody else in Congress. 21, I think, was the number. And he engaged the people who were frustrated and came out the other side. At least they don't agree. They don't agree with him, but at least they respect the process. They respect that he went toe to toe.
We can't let this conversation go with Christina at the table without talking about Delegate Bob Marshall as well. Speaking of fascinating comments, Bob Marshall is just such an interesting character. And I wonder, we've got the clip of the comments that just got him in all kinds of hot water. But I wonder if you would just set up for our viewers, who is Bob Marshall and what's his history around some of these issues?
Bob Marshall is one of the interesting characters that have been in the General Assembly for many years, and there's a certain ambivalence toward him from both fellow Republicans, journalists, Democrats. He's a very passionate person about his issues, and his issue is primarily abortion. And he becomes so blinded by it that he can become very hurtful.
Yes.
And yet that passion, there is something behind that is real, but it does also get him into a lot of trouble because of the way he works.
This is where you want to be either Kimball Payne or one of the other reporters sitting there in this moment on the General Assembly floor.
The number of children who were born subsequent to a first abortion who have handicaps has increased dramatically. Why? Because when you abort the firstborn of any, nature takes its vengeance on the subsequent children. In the Old Testament, the firstborn of every being, animal and man, was dedicated to the Lord. There's a special punishment, Christians would suggest, and with the knowledge that they have from faith, it's been verified by a study from the Virginia Commonwealth University. First abortions of the first pregnancy, much more damaging to a woman than latter abortions. None of these are good for anybody, but this organization had it.
Christina Nuckols, you've known Bob Marshall for a number of years. He's certainly been a guest on our radio program, and he is such a contradiction, and I think you wrote about that so beautifully, about where this contradiction is with him.
Yes, and he tries to make a dichotomy that is hard to sustain, and that he loves children, he does not condemn people, it's abortion itself, but he very quickly crosses that line into condemning women who have made this very difficult choice. And when he gets into then the children who come later and trying to suggest that there is a difference between the parent and the child and create some suggestion that there's a cause and effect here. I don't think he really, he's just stream of consciousness as Bob does, going on and on. He gets on this tangent and starts, quoting Bible verses and all kinds, and medical journals.
In fact, I love the way you wrote this. You said, Delegate Bob Marshall looked haggard and bewildered as he searched his cluttered desk Wednesday for a way to explain and soften the hurtful words he had spoken a few days earlier. The Bible regards barrenness as a curse, not children, he muttered as he leafed through the Encyclopedia of Judaism and then reached for a medical journal. I should have used the term physical complications. And you just read that and you think, wow.
He never fully understood what the controversy, what he had done wrong.
So as a reporter, Kimball Payne, how do you deal with those moments where, I think Christina did a great job of sort of saying, now, here's who this guy is, here's what he said. It doesn't take away the hurt of it. But I wonder as a reporter, when you hear someone say something that is going to be a major headline, how do you deal with that in terms of who they really are as a person? Do you feel any obligation to sort of position that in some way?
Well, it's hard to encapsulate somebody in a news story, and especially when all this flashes up. I think back to Frank Hargrove, who, when they were talking about the apology for slavery, and this is an elderly man who got kind of jumbled over his words, and you have to
the digging out just got him in deeper.
Exactly. And you get this, people get enough, talk long enough, and they realize they just stumble into something, a place they never wanted to go. Now, Bob's a different case. I think if you are a student of Virginia government, you know who Bob Marshall is.
Absolutely.
The guy's I don't think anyone would deny his parliamentary understanding of rules and whatnot is
he's
way
a very
high up
winsome
there.
figure, and
and he's affable as well.
Yes.
He's more than willing to chat you up. He's taking pictures in the hall. He's not sort of some rigid, person who doesn't even engage and has no warmth to him or anything like that. I think you just try and build out the context to these people, and they are who they are.
Yeah.
They've got plenty of platforms to get their words out.
The real difference between him and somebody and many other people who have really strong views about abortion and other social issues is his affability. He really is just a genuine nice person, whereas a lot of people take their positions personally, and if you're opposed to their position, then they're, you know,
Cuccinelli's in the same mold, though. Cuccinelli is calling you back on the cell phone. He's talking to you. He is not going to say something outrageous and then run and hide.
Right.
I mean,
well, I remember the day he said on a radio show that environmentalists were socialists, and didn't we all know that? And you just, whoa. And but you know, he stayed with it and he defended it, and it, you know, it's the way he feels about it. So I guess we're not going to get the transportation. I guess we're not getting any train. We did reopen the rest stops, though.
We did.
Okay, so
temporarily until they run out of money.
Until they run out of money again.
So 19. This is interesting because the governor put out a 19-page transportation plan, $17 billion in new transportation revenues over the next 10 years. Then pretty quickly after the gavel banged, said, "Oops, that's probably not going to happen."
Yeah,
this year.
I mean, given where we are financially as a state, given where the politics are, I'm not sure there's much appetite for $17 million in new money.
Here's the question: can a candidate get elected by being honest about that? Because I think, you know, a lot of people would have looked at this and said, "Really?"
Well,
I mean, the Washington Post described it as pixie dust.
Creed Deeds was honest about it. I mean, Creed Deeds
wrote in the Washington.
He wrote in the Washington Post that and he got he just got beat up for it. And so, I mean, I think that's a really good question.
I think it's going to take, and I hope it doesn't, but I think it will take a natural disaster of a significant size. You know, we will not learn, I don't think, unless lives are at risk because of the decisions we've made.
Well, I got to tell you, if last July didn't teach you anything, if you know, a broken pump can back things up the way that
for an entire day.
For an entire day,
right.
I don't know how in the world we think we can have a reasonably credible evacuation plan out of the region.
Can't.
I'm sorry, I just don't understand how.
And the fact is, we don't have a good way of getting out of here. We're going to have to hunker down and hope we survive. That's where we are with transportation.
Good times.
Everybody panic.
Yeah, good times. So if it's this is another show for another day. But if it's unreasonable to get people out, then you probably need to come back and start talking about something that is reasonable and is possible to do.
Hurricane parties.
I hear you. I hear you. So what's next? You got a big wedding coming up, and congratulations on that.
Thank you very
Nicely
much.
done.
That's next.
That's next for you, yes. Yeah. You know what you're supposed to do. Shut up and show up. You know how that goes, right?
Wear beige, shut up, whatever.
You're good.
I'm the yes man. That is
exactly.
not the problem.
So what's next?
We got the reconvene session. I mean, this primary for Glenn Nye is going to ramp up. I mean, you've got 7 Republicans that are all over the map. I mean, you know, you got one who just jumped in the race who favors civil unions. You got another rallying with Duncan Hunter. I mean, you've got, you know, donation checks to Barack Obama that I'd imagine will get brought up during the primary. It is going to be fascinating to watch, and you watch what happens in November too. 2,700 pages. I mean, there are going to be unintended consequences. We're already hearing about Viagra for sex offenders. I mean, I can only imagine what the flyers are going to be like in September. I mean,
the senator from Oklahoma is trying to take care of that.
I'm sure the senator from Oklahoma is trying to take care of that. But for us, I mean, the June primary is going to be really huge on the Republican side.
It's going to be a really interesting off your election, as they say. So midterms, I guess, is
no break.
Yeah, no break at all. And then, of course, we've got some interesting mayor elections coming up here in the spring, and we'll be having the guests who are the candidates for the mayor in Newport News and in Norfolk on the program in coming weeks. So no shortage of work for us, huh?
It's what makes living in Virginia wonderful.
Indeed it does. Thank you to all of you for being with us tonight. I'll be back in a moment with a final thought. Call me crazy, but I see a theme developing. Tidewater Community College President Deborah DeCroce talked about it this month at the Cox Business Executive Discussion Series produced with Inside Business, the Hampton Roads Journal of Business. Dr. DeCroce noted that the Lone Ranger business success story is a thing of the past, and the future business success will be the result of collaboration. That's because she said the challenges are too big and the resources required are too many for business as usual. I saw that in action this month in the charitable sector. 2 nonprofits, Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Rita Welsh Adult Learning Program, came together for an event called Dancing with the Williamsburg Stars. It was the kind of strategic partnership that makes sense today. Organizations coming together to share volunteer resources, to jointly ask for support, and then to equally share in the profits of their joint ventures. And apparently these dancing events are all the rage. Following on the success of Dancing with the Stars last Saturday night in Virginia Beach, the United Way raised more than $40,000 with 18 local celebrities and their professional dance partners. United Way's been hit hard by the economy, as have so many other nonprofit agencies. These organizations should take just about 10 seconds to breathe a sigh of relief, having prepared themselves for the worst of Virginia's budget, but they ought not spend more time than that in repose. They need to look around for strategic partners and map out a strategy to stay relevant, solvent, and meaningful. From what I hear, the business community would welcome, maybe even insist upon, that kind of nonprofit partnership that's becoming such a staple of life in corporate America. A new day calls for a new plan, and it's clear we're not going back to the way things used to be. Oh, and if I'm ever invited to show my license and registration to James City County Police Chief Emmett Harmon, I plan to wax eloquently about his divine waltz. I probably won't get off with a warning, but that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. If you'd like to view tonight's program again or any of our past programs, visit our website at whatmatters.tv. Kimball just realized he's getting married in a month. He got a little choked up on that. You'll also find lots of other ways to get in touch with us and sign up for our weekly newsletter to find out what we have in the works for you. When they say, that's not the time to do that, just so you know. Yeah, just so you know, not the time to do it. I also hope you'll join us or call us each weekday at noon on the radio dial for Hearsay. That's on 89.5 WHRV-FM. And there's what I hope is some great conversation there as well. Thanks again for watching. I'm Cathy Lewis. We'll see you next time for another look at what matters.